Earth is an amazing technology that allows just about anybody to explore something on the other side of the world from them. But what happens when you come across something you feel like you weren't supposed to see? Welcome back, friends. I'm your host Kennedy, and today on Most Amazing we are taking to Google Earth to count down the top 10 mysterious Google Earth coordinates you should never visit. Starting us off at number 10 is a massive pentagram. In an isolated corner of Kazakhstan lies a dark symbol measuring roughly 1,200 feet that appears to have been literally carved right into the Earth's surface. Although you might not be able to fully see the entire symbol at ground level, from above, the stark pentagram is clear as day. Conspiracy theorists have linked the cliffside pentagram to the Freemasons and Wiccans, believing that it is a site of animal sacrifice and satanic ritual, although this has never actually been totally confirmed. But I will admit, it is a bit mysterious. Apparently, there are almost no other signs of human habitation in the area, plus, you know, a giant pentagram etched into the Earth's surface isn't something you see every day, nor is it usually a great sign. So whether it is a cursed geoglyph from Satan worshippers or not, maybe it's just better to play it safe and steer clear. Coming in at number 9, a hill of crosses. Found on top of a hill in northern Lithuania is a site that, depending on your own personal beliefs, could either be considered a thing of beauty or one of the most strange things in the world. The Hill of Crosses began popping up back in 1831 following the Polish-Russian uprising, and over the years it has grown to host nearly 100,000 crosses, crucifixes, rosaries, and religious carvings. As generations pass and the collection grows, the place has come to signify the peaceful endurance of Lithuanian people despite the threats they face throughout history. Now, that part is lovely, I can't deny. But also, I know I'm not alone in seeing a hill filled with an overflowing amount of religious symbols and feeling a little uneasy. Since, you know, usually that many in one place is to ward off some kind of evil. That being said, maybe it really is nothing but a beautiful display and a symbol of their endurance. But are you willing to go and find out yourself? Coming in at number 8, Nagoro. A teeny little rural village in the Aya Valley region of Japan. What makes this seemingly cute and quaint town a mysterious and creepy attraction is that it is famous for being filled with upwards of 350 life-sized dolls. Now, I don't know about you, but there are few things I find more terrifying than creepy dolls, and it's only made creepier when you find out that the entire village is only made up of about 27 residents. Apparently in the early 2000s, Tsukimi Ayano, who'd moved away from the area when she was young, moved back once her father fell ill, and as a gift for him, she made her first doll in his likeness and placed it in a field. And since that day, she has made more than 400. But she isn't alone in this endeavor. Inspired by the initial doll for her father, many residents in the village followed in her footsteps and began making their own life-size dolls in their likeness or for their loved ones. And soon enough, even the school was joining in on the trend. Sadly, the school closed in 2012 due to the decreasing population. However, the dolls remain scattered across the village, growing in numbers as the years go by. I mean, visit it at your own risk, but don't say I didn't warn you about a village filled with 400 creepy dolls. Coming in at number 7, the Parikkala Sculpture Park. Similarly to the Village of Dolls, this garden was created by a self-taught recluse artist named Viho Ronkonen, and this exhibit is definitely one of the more haunting things I have come across. Born in 1944, Ronkonen began working at a nearby paper mill at the age of 16. And as the story goes, he used his first paycheck to buy apple seedlings and a bag of concrete. And so his eerie sculpture garden began. For the next 50 years, he continued to add to his collection. So much so that by the time he passed away in 2010, there were 550 50 completed concrete sculptures adorning his property. However, these statues are very, interesting, often placed in extremely odd positions. For example, one of the most strange parts is the 225 naked yogi section. However, they are not the only ones that give off a creepy vibe. Some of the statues sport human teeth, which makes me feel very worried about where he found those, while others were created with a speaker placed inside them that omits incomprehensible sounds. I mean, top to bottom, it's just all a very strange little place. Coming in at number 6 is Snake Island. Found off the coast of Brazil in the Atlantic Ocean, is an island that I am warning you now to never visit. Quite literally, the place of nightmares, this island is home to the critically endangered golden lancehead pit viper, who became trapped on the island thousands of years ago at the end of the last ice age. Apparently, as the ocean levels were rising due to the melting ice, this island became disconnected from the mainland, which in turn forced the snakes to adapt to a new environment, eventually increasing their population to such a high degree that the island was rendered entirely too dangerous for public visitation. Now, I bet you're wondering, there are tons of venomous snakes everywhere. Why is this place so different? Well, for starters, it is pretty small as far as islands go, measuring only about 106 acres, but it's also home to upwards of 4,000 snakes, each weaponized with a venom so deadly that it can actually melt human flesh. In case you're wondering, that is roughly 1 snake per square meter, or 10 feet. So with that many snakes trapped on an island that small, there is pretty much nowhere you can escape from them. Coming in at number 5, Hashima Island. At one point in time, this small island off the coast of Nagasaki was a huge mecca for undersea coal mining. However, due to a number of atrocities committed during World War II, it now lies an abandoned island, void of all inhabitants, but filled with many ghosts from its past. It all started when the island was purchased by the Mitsubishi Group in 1890, and they began extracting coal from the undersea mines. By 1916, business was growing, and so they began building infrastructure to house the miners and their families, and over the next 50 years, the small island city continued to grow. However, it all started to go down south around 1930, when the company began pushing conscripted Korean civilians and Chinese prisoners of war into forced labor under very harsh and dangerous conditions paired with brutal treatment. Due to the labor conditions, an estimated 1,300 of these conscripted workers died on the island, either by underground accidents, malnutrition, or exhaustion. This treatment continued despite the rising death toll until the late 1960s, when the petroleum industry began turning coal essentially obsolete. Finally, by 1974, Mitsubishi closed the mine and the island was cleared indefinitely. Now a literal ghost town filled with decaying buildings to match, it's believed that all the souls who lost their lives remain haunting this city to this day. Coming in at number 4, the former Sanzhi UFO houses. When construction on these peculiar houses began in 1978, they were marketed to be vacation resorts for US military officers coming from their East Asian postings. But as you might notice, they have an extremely futuristic look to them, hence why they got the nickname UFO houses. However, the bubbly pod-like architecture wasn't the only strange thing about these houses. A mere 2 years after construction began, the project was abandoned and never finished due to several car accidents and a number of construction workers who took their own lives on the job. This of course caused a huge loss on the investment, and they were forced to end the project. The plan from there was to tear down all the buildings, despite a major public pushback, and eventually in 2010 all the UFO houses were demolished. But of course, this still didn't answer the mysterious question on everyone's mind. What was behind all this tragedy, and why were they so hell-bent on destroying the buildings? Well, there are a few theories. Some believe that the site was the former burial ground for Dutch soldiers, and that the workers had been cursed during construction, while another Another theory claims that the tragedies were due to the bisecting of the Chinese dragon sculpture located near the resort gates. And of course, the shape of the buildings drew in conspiracy theorists who claim aliens were the reason for death, and that they could have threatened the company to tear it down. To be honest, no one knows why it all happened, but it's still considered a haunted place, so you better steer clear just to be safe. Coming in at number 3 is Voz Island. Way back in the 1920s, the Red Army began searching for a discreet place to build a military complex for inventing, producing, and testing biological weapons. They wanted something small and far away from the Soviet borders so as not to draw attention, and eventually by 1948, such a place was found. Almost immediately, a top-secret Soviet lab began testing agents such as smallpox, anthrax, and plague, among others. However, what they didn't see coming was that the island, once split between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, would begin to grow in size once the Aral Sea began drying up in the 1960s. Then fast forward to 1971, and a weaponized smallpox was accidentally released from the lab, infecting 10 people, 3 of whom lost their life. And by the 1990s, the secrecy of the lab got compromised, and all island inhabitants were evacuated, leaving the base completely abandoned by 1991. However, in their haste to leave, many of the containers were not properly destroyed or sealed, and so over time, these containers began to leak, contaminating the grounds for decades. Now, the good news is that by 2002, a lot of the sites were decontaminated, but many areas still remain contaminated, and it's still one of the most feared and deadly places in the world. Coming in at number 2, North Yungas Road. Also hauntingly referred to as Death Road, the Yungas Road is a 60-kilometer long stretch found in Bolivia that I would highly recommend you don't take your chances with. As you can imagine, you don't get the nickname Death Road without having a reputation that precedes you. The original road was built in the 1930s by the forced labor of Paraguayan prisoners, and up until a new route was built back in 2006, it was pretty much the only way to go from region to region. During this time, the route became notorious for its dangerous conditions and rising death toll, on average facing 209 accidents per year, 96 of which resulted in death. However, some years were worse than others. In July of 1983, a bus fell from the road into the canyon, killing more than 100 passengers. Then later, in the mid-90s, the road was averaging 1 victim per day. Even in 2011, there was a total of 114 accidents and 42 deaths. Nowadays, the death road is restricted to purely cyclists, and cars must now use the new route. However, that doesn't mean it's still not just about the most dangerous road in the entire world. And last up in our number 1 spot, Bikini Atoll. A tiny ring of small coral islands is located in the Republic of the Marshall Islands. Bikini Atoll is a beautiful area with a dark and unfortunate backstory. You see, in the midst of World War II, after the nuclear attacks on Japanese soil took place, the American Army didn't waste much time before planning additional nuclear testing. Then in 1946, after deciding on the small area of Bikini Atoll, the military went ahead and forced the entire population to evacuate to neighboring islands so that they could carry out their nuclear testing. For the next 12 years, between 1946 and 1958, the United States detonated 23 nuclear devices at the site, including 20 hydrogen bombs, one of which was said to have been more than 1,000 times more powerful than the weapon dropped in Nagasaki, while another caused a giant tsunami, sinking several ships. Now, of course, there was not quite the same understanding of the lasting repercussions these tests would have. However, nearly a century later, and the island is still unfit for proper habitation due to the radiation and damage caused by these tests. So tragically, the residents that were promised to be relocated back to their home were never able to return. And if you ever get stranded there, you certainly won't last long. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you next time.